Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down each SEC football game in Week 9 from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Ole Miss Rebels visiting the Auburn Tigers. This game is going to be played at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, and it's going to be at Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn, Alabama. The game, from a betting perspective, Ole Miss opened as a 1-point dog to Auburn, and this line has moved a little bit as the week's gone on, where the Tigers are now favored by 2.5. The over-under opened at 72.5 and has dropped to 66 as of the recording of this video. I'll bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you make of the movement in this game? A lot of people probably look at this on the surface and think, hey, the number 10 team should be favored over the number 18 team, not the other way around, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be one of those games that's sort of a sharp versus square, if you will, where a lot of the public will probably be on Ole Miss on this side, and the market and kind of the big dollars are clearly on Auburn here. But I also think, forgetting the betting aspect of it, this game on a national perspective is probably underrated, just because Auburn is one of 3 teams in the SEC that actually controls its own destiny to get to the conference title game. They haven't played Alabama yet. They only have one conference loss. Alabama has a conference loss. And of course, if Ole Miss wins, then you could easily see a path to them finishing kind of as the quote unquote third best team in the SEC, maybe behind Alabama and Georgia. So why don't you get into injuries, weather, and Nick's news and notes?
Sure. So let's start with the weather. Saturday night on the plains, we should have temperatures in the 50s, about a 5 mile per hour wind, and a 24% chance of rain for this game. On the injury side of things, let's start with Auburn first. Obviously, linebacker Owen Pappoe has been a guy who's been in the news about whether he's going to play or not play over the last few weeks. And after this bye week, he may finally return to the lineup this weekend, which would be a huge add for that Tigers defense. Rush and TD Moultrie appears to be contending with a compliance issue, and that makes his status kind of murky for the Tigers. And then looking at the other side of things on Ole Miss's, we've got left guard Ben Brown with a biceps injury is going to keep him out for the rest of the season. And we haven't seen much on the wide receivers that have been missing games lately. Braylon Sanders, Jonathan Mingo, Braylon Brown, or even tight end Chase Rogers. Those are names to watch on Saturday leading up to kickoff. Obviously, the more weapons that quarterback Matt Corral has, the better chance for Lane Kiffin's team to win on the road there. Let's go to the news and notes next. Start with Ole Miss. And, I'd say this is another week, another strong SEC win for Lane Kiffin's team. We expected there might be a little bit of a letdown after, a win in Knoxville, a close win against the Vols that ended with some controversy, but that really wasn't the case against LSU at home last week. They won 31-17, and really the game wasn't even as close as that score indicates. The Tigers scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. They were down 31-7 late in that second half. So give Lane Kiffin's team credit. Another win. We keep expecting them to have a letdown after some of these games, but they just keep moving on, and now they're a top 10 team in the country. Speaking of top 10, they rank top 10 in 6 offensive categories coming out of that game. Total offense, scoring offense, rushing offense, first downs, passes intercepted, only 1 all season, and then turnovers lost, which is 5. So this is obviously a team that is relying on one of the most elite offenses in college football. We'll see how that fares for them against this Auburn team, who looked really good in a 38-23 road win against Arkansas back in week 7. It seems like winning this game is the step towards certifying the legitimacy of their candidacy to win this division, right? And then I would just point out, before I hand it over to you for more betting analysis, Auburn has really dominated this series in recent times. The Tigers have won 5 in a row against the Rebels, and that includes a 35-28 win last season in Oxford against Lane Kiffin in his first season there. But the all-time series tilts towards Auburn in a pretty decided way, 34-11 advantage. And then the last 11 of the last 17 games in this series have been decided by double digits. Auburn's 9-2 in those games, meaning they've won big, more games than not in the last couple of decades here. So Christopher, keeping that in mind, keeping that the lower ranked team is favored in mind, keeping that you think there's some sharps and squares situation here. How are we betting this game?
Yeah, so let's look at the spot for both of these teams first. And you mentioned Auburn playing Arkansas in their last game. Well, that's sort of interesting. Auburn's at home off a bye week, first of all. But second of all, there's not a team in the SEC, certainly, and maybe not even in the country, that is as close to Ole Miss as Arkansas is. The defense is basically Ole Miss basically copied Arkansas's defense in the offseason, and their offenses are very similar. In fact, the Arkansas offensive coordinator at one point was the coordinator for Lane Kiffin. So if you're Auburn, not only are you at home off a bye week, but you're playing a team that you prepared for, even before your bye week. It's the same game plan, more or less, the same schemes. So then you look at the other side, and this is Ole Miss's third SEC road game in 5 weeks. But not only that, look at the 4 games they've just played. You had at Alabama, and that was the Kiffin popcorn pregame interview game. Then you had the 52-51 game against Arkansas with the crazy 2-point conversion stop at the end. Then you had the game at Tennessee where Vols fans threw everything on the field. Then you had the game with LSU, which Orgeron and Kiffin are actually very close. And, Orgeron was on Kiffin's staff for a long time. Now you got to go to Auburn, and you're telling me that a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds are going to get emotionally up for that game again to the same level they've been for all these other games at the same time that Auburn's at home off a bye. Then you look at kind of the depth, right? Ole Miss's defense, they went to the transfer portal and got tons of bodies in the offseason for a reason, right? They don't have the depth on defense from a roster standpoint. And then on offense, Nick, you already talked about all the injuries that this team's dealing with right now. Assuming that they don't get one or two of the receivers back or the tight end back. I mean, according to SEC StatCat, they've thrown the ball to Dontario Drummond 50 times. And if you take away the running backs, which they throw too often, just look at, downfield passing targets, receivers, tight ends. The next guy is Jahcour Pearson with 14 targets. He hasn't topped 20 receiving yards in a game this season. And that's sort of like your number 2 tight end / receiver right now, is a guy who has never gone above 20 yards in a game. And then you look on the other side, Auburn has Roger McCreary as a cornerback, which Pro Football Focus grades him as the 3rd best in the country. So, if you're playing a team that has one really good receiver in Drummond, and you've got one of the best cornerbacks in the country, that bodes pretty well for Auburn being able to contain the passing game. Not only that, but Ole Miss, they lost maybe their best offensive lineman for the season, and their other starting guard, if he plays, is less than 100%. And Auburn's pretty good at standard down sack rate, 30th. Ole Miss is 112th in protecting against sack rate on standard down. So I think Auburn actually has a pretty good advantage over Ole Miss when Ole Miss wants to pass the ball in this game. Now on the other side of the ball, Ole Miss's run defense is 110th in EPA per rush, 115th standard downs line yards, 110th in stuff rate. And Tank Bigsby, there were some questions of Brian Harsin of, is Tank Bigsby healthy? Is he hurt? He didn't look like himself in the couple of games leading into the bye week. Maybe that will help him. Freshman Jarquez Hunter could be fresher this week also. Sometimes when you're a freshman in the SEC, especially at a position like running back, you could wear down late in the season. He's coming off a bye. So I think actually the number in this game, if you look at like SP Plus or other kind of respected projections, has Auburn maybe 3.5 point favorite. But then also you have some matchup advantages and spot advantages in terms of the schedule that maybe lean toward Auburn as well. But Nick, are you betting on this game on the side and the total?
So I feel like I'm having a little bit of an SEC betting identity crisis here. If you watch our show at all, I sort of proclaim myself early in the season as a Lane Kiffin over guy. But I find myself, as I look at these numbers, for the 3rd consecutive week, booking myself for a Lane Kiffin under. And the reason being, the last couple of games, LSU and Tennessee had really high totals. The Tennessee game was in the low 80s. LSU game was in the mid 70s. And they were both comfortably under. So this one's 66, not quite as high. It opened in the low 70s. It's come down a little bit. Everybody's seeing that maybe we're overestimating the total in these Ole Miss games. So let me continually beat the Lane Kiffin under drum for the 3rd straight week and go under 66. However, I will back Kiffin and his Rebels with giving me 2.5 points. And I'd love it if I could get 3. I know some sites I've seen this week are offering 3. So I'll take Ole Miss plus 2.5 for the purposes of our picks and under 66. How are you seeing it?
I'll go under 66 as well, although I've loved it a lot more when it was 72.5. It's moved it a lot by this point. And also I'll go Auburn 2.5. Like Nick, like you just said, if it's flirting with 3 or higher, then I don't like it as much, but I do like Auburn in this game at anything less than 3. So I'll go with -2.5. But for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.